Despite taking a stance against politics in games, your games have become more political. What gives?
That also was kind of a multi-layered answer. Just right off the bat, the political environment that we're currently in is not like anything I've ever known being alive. Not too long ago, I watched a couple movies. One in particular, it stars Elliot Gould and Candice Bergen. It's like a late 60s, early 70s movie. It takes place on like a college campus, and Elliot Gould is like going for his doctorate or something like that, and he wants to become a teacher, and there's just so much upheaval and civil unrest and political craziness, and because it's right around the Vietnam War, and you see kids rioting, and glass being broken and bombs being thrown, and the police and the military being called in, and like one side versus another side. It's fucking crazy. And we're kind of going through that again. So these are kind of unique times, is basically what I'm saying. And unique times calls for a different kind of response. Any other time before the current era, I really wouldn't, because politics didn't really... I always had a mild interest in politics, but nothing major. But now I find myself listening to and watching the news and political commentary and figuring out what's going on and various candidates and politicians. I'm tuned in because I feel like in this day and age I have to be. So that's definitely a factor. I was very much of the liberal persuasion back in, I'd say the 90s. I was born in 1974, so politically, I wasn't really that aware of anything in the 80s, maybe by the end of the 80s. My freshman year of high school, I think, was 1989. So maybe a teensy bit in the 80s, but mostly the 90s, because I did most of my high school during the 90s. I went to college and graduated in the 90s, and then I started working, and so in the 90s, I would say that I was very much a liberal. And just having grown up, and now the Overton window and everything else is kind of shifted. Maybe everybody doesn't agree with that, but I see it. A lot of other people do, so I'm taking it as, that's objective reality. And so if I've always been kind of like so I went from like a slightly left moderate centrist to a slightly right moderate centrist. Some of that is because I've just gotten older, and your values and priorities and beliefs and things like that shifts, as you go from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s. I'm 48 now. But some of that is, I see what's happening in the culture, and it just freaks me out and worries me, especially because I have kids, and I don't want them to grow up in some crazy radical left revolutionary. It's like the sexual revolution part 2, and it's going about as well as Woodstock 2, if you remember that, also from the 90s. That literally, after day 2, was a shit show. Literally. And I wasn't there, but I watched it on TV when I was younger, and then I also saw that Netflix documentary. So that's kind of where it's going. It's kind of the political climate now and the culture today is kind of just as far as the eye can see, porta potties just uprooted and lying flat. It's spilling over, and drugs and dehydration and the evils of corporate America and perhaps, yes, runaway capitalism and rape. And did I mention drugs? So yeah, it's kind of and just being like trapped in it where you can't like get out or go anywhere. Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare. And so that's why I find myself among conservative circles now. And while I don't generally put a lot of political stuff in my games, it's all from my perspective and my point of view. So yeah, occasionally I will. Plus, it's funny to poke fun at, various sacred cows and our elite ruling class, which is very much, liberal and woke these days. So I poke fun at that. The biggest, still doing a video. Maybe it was the wind. I don't know. The biggest political one was the Good Samaritan, and that's available for free now on Big Geek Emporium. It was a little too much for Drive-Thru RPG, which I totally understand. They didn't want to get into that. It was taken down within hours of my uploading it originally last year at some point. And that's because Roe versus Wade had just been overturned. And I kind of, in the back of my mind, wanted to do something that was to commemorate that. But then the straw that broke the camel's back that really pushed me to write something in that direction was the Drive-Thru RPG bundle that was heavily advertised all over the fucking internet. Wherever you went to a role-playing game forum or something like that, you saw this, or Drive-Thru itself, you saw this advertised. And it was specifically against the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And it was definitely pro-abortion or pro-choice. And it was anti-pro-life. And I think the money specifically was going to these organizations or charities or whatever that were pro-abortion. And that bothered me. Just the utter blatant politicalization, whatever, of that issue. And I like going the other way. If everybody is going to the right, then generally speaking, I will feel compelled to check out the left and vice versa. So yeah, that was kind of a deep dive, that one short adventure into politics. But generally speaking, my politics is kind of light. Like I said, I'll poke fun at this and that, and I'll mention something that's happening that I'd be either interested in, or something that bugs me, or something that I think is cool. But it's just kind of layered into all the other things that are either being referenced or that, there's a lot that goes into the things that I make, and Schultz, and a lot of different layers. There's like 111 layers, and politics is just one of those things. So, yeah, you can see it in places here and there. But generally, I mean, it's just because it's not super interesting to bring real-world politics into a gaming product, generally speaking. And that's another reason I don't do it that often. But yeah, I did do an anti-abortion themed adventure, The Good Samaritan, and yeah, so that was admittedly very heavy-handed. But yeah, I don't generally do